just a lot of people. I'd like to say thank you to Calistoga Speedway and the Hall of Fame. This is such an honor to be up here. You know, my dad was the showman. I was just a kid named Worm that turned some wrenches behind the car. And that was all I did. You know, I just followed the legend. But, you know, I'd like to say, you know, we came to Calistoga in my first early days, and they were wheeling around here in sprint cars without roll cages. Guys like Sherman Cleveland and Walt Reef, they were the heroes, you know, and my dad could barely get a ride. He had ran West Capitol in super modifieds and DCRA midgets, and he would come up to Calistoga trying to land a ride, and no one would really give him a ride. And then finally, Ray Smith gave him a ride, Don Snow gave him a ride, and he actually won his first race in Don Snow's Black 15 car. And that was, to me, like, that was like we'd arrived, you know. And then many years went on, and my dad and Walter T hooked up, and everybody knows the stories there. They were almost unbeatable at years, and it was a great deal. I'm sure my sister would like to say something.
I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight and remembering my dad after all these years. It really means a lot to our family. This is the place he loved to race at, and this is the place that took his life. And I think that Gary Patterson would have wanted to go out that way. Who gets to live the way they want to live all their life and then die the way they'd want to die? You know, there's no other way. And that's the only way I can deal with it, you know. A couple of years before he died, he told me that he would never meet his grandkids, and he probably wouldn't be alive. He wouldn't see 50, and he died at 46. So I think he pretty much knew what was going on. He was a pretty special guy. And this is my son, Ronnie, one of his grandkids that he never got to meet. And I think he looks a lot like my dad. Say hi.
I'd like to take a moment to call somebody up that I know that is kind of overlooked in my dad's career, and that's Hans Paulson. I don't know if many of you know who Hans is, but Hans worked for Tognotti's Auto World. He built their chassis for many years. He was always my dad's second-hand man, and when my dad was off racing, he was like my father, so give him a warm welcome. Okay, now, I know that many of you may not know this story, and I'm going to invite this person up, but they've been talking a lot about him tonight. Mike Andrietta is one of my dad's best friends, and I don't know if you all know where that name Fat Rat came from. Okay, so yeah, I think it was probably 68 or 69. I was pretty little, and still little. But my dad and Rat wanted to build a super modified to go on at West Capitol, and we only had a 110 service at this duplex in the garage that my dad was living at. So they cut a hole in the attic and was going to chase some wire up to the service panel to get 220 to build this welder. And they're both big guys. And Rat looked at me and my dad looked at me and they said, "Get in that hole." So about halfway down through this attic, it's really dark. I'm scared. There's fiberglass everywhere. And here's this guy, Rat, at the other end with this flashlight going, "Come on, you little worm." And I'm like, "A worm?" And my dad says, "Just call him a damn rat." And I said, "No, he's a damn fat rat."
Thanks, Jimmy. You know, there's really not a big difference in what's going on here tonight. I realize it's amazing when Teresa said that Gary passed in 1983. To me, it seems like it was yesterday. But if he hadn't have passed away, I guarantee he wouldn't even be here tonight. He would have enjoyed what's going on here tonight through his family and through his friends, but he hated being in front of a bunch of people. It harkens me back to a time in Australia when Gary and I were over there, and Mike Raymond, we were racing for him, and he gathered a bunch of promoters and maybe, I don't know, it was 25, 30 people. We went to a place in Sydney called Dirty Dick's, and I may or may not say the theme of the restaurant right, but it's Elizabethan, like in the old days when the girls had push-up bras and their tits were, their breasts were hanging out, and they had stockades and all this stuff. So we're there and we're at the bar and we're having a couple cocktails, and it's time to sit down for dinner. And the first thing that happened is Gary and I had to go get locked up in a stockade, and they poured a pint of beer down your throat because we were perping down the tops of the little winches serving the booze. So just to let you know that he really didn't like big crowds and being around a bunch of people, especially people that were going to give him accolades or talk about how good of a race car driver or a person, which means the most to me, he was. They served the first course. He never ate any of his salad. And all of a sudden they bring out this gigantic, and there was like 5 or 6 other promoters that we were going to race for that year. And right across from the table from where Gary and I were sitting was this, I don't remember his name, but I believe he was a promoter from
Gary Hoffman.
Christchurch or wherever.
Gary Hoffman.
Gary Hoffman, yeah. He had a beautiful, so I'm glad you're here, Sills, because you back up my story, but he had a beautiful red sweater on, and Gary's going to me, come on, Rat, let's get the hell out of here. And I go, what for? We're just getting ready to eat. I don't want to be around all these people. So the second course was this fish, was about this long. The whole fish had lemons and this white sauce all over the top of it. Patterson reaches down, gets the plate, turns it upside down on the table. All this white shit splashes all over this guy's red sweater. The people come in, kick his ass out. He says, are you going to come? I go, no, shit, there's more fish down there. I'm not going. So he left. But anyhow, he would appreciate all the accolades, but he really would not have been comfortable being here. And he liked racing cars. And to me, he was Gary Patterson, the racer. And when he passed away, his family, Jimmy and Teresa, asked me to say something at his funeral. Well, I'm glad Sills didn't stay up here much longer, because the first time I had to read this piece of paper that I'm going to read to you guys tonight was at his funeral, and guess who I had to go after? Gary Gerald. So Gary Gerald's up there, and I guarantee you after he got through talking about the 35, 40-second, minute-and-a-half kisses and all the stuff that Patterson was famous for, nobody knew what the hell I had to say. But somebody else mentioned Manuel tonight. Manuel, after I read this thing, I think Manuel might have been the only guy that remembered what I said. So he asked me to give him a copy, but this is actually the original piece of paper in 1983 that I wrote some notes down about my good friend, Gary Patterson. It goes as follows. I was asked to speak of Gary Patterson, the race driver, by his children, Jim and Teresa. Gary Patterson, a racer, race car driver, was known by many people by many different names. In the early 60s, he was known as the Dancing Phantom by the press and his friends, but the Dancing Phantom didn't win all those races in those early years. It was Gary Patterson, the racer. In the 70s, in the early 70s, Gary was also called the hostile hippie by the press and his friends. But us drivers who really knew who Gary was, we knew who won those races. It was Gary Patterson, the racer. In the 70s, yet another name, the preacher. This one worked well for Gary Rice and Gary Rice and Gary Patterson, who traveled throughout Australia as the teacher and the preacher and winning midget races everywhere they went. Gary also was called by Pato by his Aussie mates. Steve Brazier, Gary Rush, Juan Ramos, and many more know who really run those races. It was Gary Patterson, the racer. And in the last few years, yet another name. This one really stuck as far as I was concerned, GP the Great. But when Gary put on that old soiled uniform and slid down inside of that race car, we know who won those races was Gary Patterson, the racer. And now with his death, Gary has beat us all yet another time. He's running the biggest race of his life, sitting on the pole of the feature race, and none of us are there yet, and he's going to win that race, I guarantee you. I miss you, Gary Patterson, the racer, and he was a great friend of mine, and I'm really happy that the family asked me again to talk to you guys tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Patterson, Teresa. One more time for the great GP, Gary Patterson, and his family. The second speaker, that's Teresa, his daughter there with Jimmy. We miss GP. He was just one of the great characters of